Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Mortdog. It is Thursday. It is about 5:45 a.m., nice and early. And let's see if I can get through the day with this thing recording and not breaking and making me lose my mind. That would be the goal. We had the patch yesterday. I was able to get a decent amount of games in, trying a bunch of various things. And the way I would describe this patch so far, from what I've seen, is a pretty damn good patch. There are a lot of playable lines. There's a lot of things you can do. I think the biggest thing, it's so interesting that people are going to struggle with, is like every line is dependent on things going right. And so line recognition in this patch is going to be really, really key. Like if you log in and you're like, I'm going to force, Seraphine's Zyra reroll, it's going to go poorly for you. Or if you're like, I'm going to force Street Demon, it's also going to go poorly for you. But if you have the right spots, a lot of comps succeed right now, which is kind of where TFT is supposed to be. That being said, I think there's still, some spots that could use a little love. Sometimes you feel like you're playing from the perfect spot and it still doesn't quite go as well. I had a worth the wait game yesterday I got LeBlanc and I was like, oh God, it's doomed. But I was able to turn it into like a 300 something cipher cash out. I hit LeBlanc 4, was going really, really well. I got a third. Now granted, that's the other thing, is that a lot of the games this patch have been everyone's alive and everyone's at like 10 or less health. And your final matchup, like that, even that game I'm complaining about LeBlanc getting a third, the final fight was down to their last carry at like less than 10% health. It was a very, very close fight. So again, it seems like we're getting pretty damn close. So far, what I look at with the patch, like if we had to start locking in the next patch, which of course we already do, it looks pretty close. I mean, like I could see a couple of minor shifts, but took us a bit, but I think we might be kind of there. So then just becomes the question of like things that just like at its core people aren't happy with, right? Like this is Street Demon and Strategist being so linked within the set design, or So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts so far. Now granted, it's been about 24 hours, so we'll see who breaks what and who complains about what in a bit. So all right. Hey, it's still recording. Okay, good. Okay, questions. Okay, so we have a question from Demasian Raptor, that guy. He's like, what are your thoughts on utility units and including them in the future? So this is another one of those design white whale questions that's really, really hard. Because I'll tell you, every time someone makes a set, when you talk about like design space, right? Because let's say you're making a carry, right? You have a carry that's like shoot a spell that does damage. Well, every designer who wants to sort of differentiate themselves to make their piece of content stand out, the natural reaction is to add complexity to that. And so, you'll do stuff like, well, shoot a spell. Oh, a car. There's like never a car on these walks, especially this early. That is shocking. Let me get out of the way. Woohoo. Okay. So, they'll have a spell that says, shoot a fireball that does damage, and then you want to add to it where it's like, and that fireball burns, or that fireball stuns, or shreds, or after casting the fireball, gain some attack speed. You always want to add an extra layer. Think of it like a CCG where it's like your card just needs extra text. After casting, draw a card, or after casting, gain a gold. A common one is after casting, give an ally a buff, right? Give an ally a shield, give an ally 10 AP. You can get a lot of situations like that. And that's where utility sort of comes from. It comes from that filling that design space of a new champion. Now, here's the problem. And I'm going to try to do this without a diagram here, so bear with me. let's say you have a caster and they shoot a fireball for 100 damage, so we'll balance it around 100, right? This caster does 100 damage. Then you have another caster that is also shooting a fireball that does damage, but also buffs an ally, right? Well, it can't do 100 damage and buff an ally. That's just stronger than the 100 damage unit. Like, why would you ever play the 100 damage unit if you could have 100 damage and a buff? So it has to be lower, right? So 95 plus a buff, 90 plus a buff, but then it becomes a question of like, if your primary job is a carry, especially as a caster, and we learned this with the set 8 Yumi, right? Like the difference between doing 49% damage and 50% damage is massive, because all that really matters is the number of casts you get to kill the target, if your damage isn't spread. I'm wandering a bit, sorry, but the point is, if your job is to kill stuff, you need to do maximum damage. If we take away some of that damage in exchange for utility, you're just a weaker damage dealer, which means you likely don't get items on you. You just are a weaker damage dealer, right? Now, we could put utility on every damage dealer, then it'd be balanced. But then we have a very complex game where everything's buffing everything, and that's kind of weird. So carries that give buffs are a natural instinct. I think there's one in set 15 already, and I'm looking at this going, I'm never itemizing this guy. It's a problem. But here's the thing. Just because it's unbalanceable doesn't mean it's not fun, right? Like, people like the buff fantasy. The other challenge with our game is that oftentimes, and this was a theory way back in the day, right? Like, I remember, I think it was Witty who was like, hey, I'm going to have Misfortune. She's going to be a 3-cost carry. And if you don't have anti-heal, you can slot in Misfortune. Great. Sounds great on paper, right? Well, no, because we have traits in our game. And when you have traits, you're not going to give up one of your trait slots that maximizes your output from your traits just to slot in a Misfortune who has 0 traits active so that you can have anti-heal. That's just not how it works. We've seen that time and time again, right? You're not going to go from 7 Street Demon down to 5 Street Demon so you can slot in anti-heal. Nope. So if people are like, what it basically turned into was, if you're running a comp that has Misfortune in it and the traits connect to Misfortune, you get anti-heal for free. Great. But it wasn't actually an interesting decision. Now, and it's, even if we go back all the way to, Joy, this was set 6, Janna, Orianna, Yumi, right? It was literally just, you wanted the best unitemized champions, which are utility champions, and so you would put them in every comp, and their power outweighed the power of traits. Especially at set 6, I believe it was, there were a lot of smaller traits, and so you would play them in every comp. And you wouldn't itemize them for the most part, or they would get leftover items, which isn't great either. Then there's a whole other dynamic. So let's say you made a 1-cost support champion. We'll just say Soraka, right? 1-cost Soraka. Something I've always said is that, let's say you have the biggest high roll in the world, okay? You load up the game, and you get 3 Sorakas. Next shop, 3 Sorakas. Next shop, 3 Sorakas. You high roll Soraka 3 on 2-1, okay? Your expectation in this situation is you should be winning fights. You high rolled like crazy, right? Well, if she's just a support champion who's just healing, how are you killing anything? You're not winning fights. Your Soraka 3 that's healing for 1,000. Sorry, there's the uphill part. Your Soraka 3 that's healing for 1,000 isn't going to, on your 1-star frontliner, isn't going to win you fights. And slamming Shojin or Deathcap on that Soraka isn't winning you fights. So what's the point, right? So that's why a lot of our champions have essentially devolved down into damage dealers. But again, it's a rich design space. Then there's one other factor. 4 costs, right? We only have, at most, 12 4 costs in a set, okay? So, what's the distribution of tanks, AD, AP, melee, ranged? Typically, what we've done is 4 tanks, 4 AD, 4 AP. Typically. Excuse me. Well, if we do that, let's say we cut some tanks, then everyone's fighting over Sejuani and Nico and whoever else is left, because we know 4 cost tanks are popular, and if there's too few of them, everyone's going to fight over them. AD and AP. Well, if we only have, one Shojin user or one Guinsoo's user or whatever, then again, if you stuck with the Guinsoo's, but everyone pulls them out of the pool, that's also a problem. And if all that's left is the support champion, who cares? You high rolled 4 cost Soraka from set 3. Yay, you lose, right? 4 costs in particular are the space where you need those endgame carries. And if there aren't carry options because we had to fill those slots with support, there's just limited choices. And in fact, over time, we've been increasing the number of 4 costs to essentially provide more options. So there's not really great room in 4 cost. Now, naturally, I think the best example of a support champion in recent modern TFT are 2 cost Janna, which was still a damage dealer but had shields, or the threats, right? This is Morgana, I think. Morgana the threat was probably the best. And I've said this on stream before, but I've always said that the best support champion, if Morgana existed in every set, TFT would be better for it. That champion is so good. It was a 3 cost that provided shred and sunder, could do damage and end fights, was a threat, really good in the early game. He slotted out later. That's a good example, but if every set had Morgana in it, the game would be boring. So that's not great. So all of this comes back to, well, how do you get them in the game? Now, I can't spoil things in the future, but I will say this is an active problem that is being worked on because, I think it was Ramblin' in Lobby 2 or something else, but, the idea of, hey, I'm in this situation, my opponent is playing X, I need to make a choice that will help me go against that player, is an interesting thing. It adds skill expression, it adds, fun control to the game. Really, a hyperbolic example here is imagine you had a champion that all they said was passive, your team gains 100 MR. Again, exaggeratory. Having that champion in so that you could go, ooh, I'm running 7 Street Demon, but if I to go down to 5 Street Demon and plug in this champion that gives my team 100 MR, I can beat the techie player. Great. I think that was some of the theory back behind old, Vanguard when they had 400 armor and stuff like that. But then we run into the hard counter problem. So it's an interesting dynamic. All of this is to say that if we want to include utility champions in our core set, gun to my head right now, again, not spoiling things in the future, I think A, we have to get creative on how you get those utility champions. B, they probably exist in the 2 and 3 cost space more than anything, because 4 costs are where people want their carries. 5 costs already have utility, but that's not what people are talking about when they say they want utility champions. They want the Jannas, the Sorakas, the Sonas. Oh, you know who my favorite utility champ of all time is, by the way? Set 8 Sona. I like that champion, but again, that's not what people are talking about. That was the one where she went it was a blue buff user, and she went green cast, which heals allies, into purple cast, which stunned somebody, into blue cast, which dealt some damage. I love that champion. That's a good example of utility. So, yeah, I know it's kind of an unsatisfying end to the question, but the reality is people want carries. We need things that are worth itemizing and ending fights. We don't want situations where high rolling a champion means you lose the game. And that's typically what support champions would do. And we need champs to end fights. So, I don't know. Every time we make one of these, it doesn't go that great. So, but it has become a running joke on the dev team also that like, hey, we're going to, can't have anything supporty or Mort will kill it, But we'll get there. I don't know. Let us know as some of these support things come out. But it is one of those things I want to keep exploring. But man, it just hasn't been successful. So, there you go. Hey, it's still recording. Things are going good today. All right. Next question. Rageblade. We're reworking Rageblade. Did you guys know that? Did you guys read Roger's article? We are. We're finally reworking Rageblade. Oh, man. So, we knew. So, again, I mentioned this in one of my posts that we're doing this to get ready for set 15. And there's stuff in set 15 I can't talk about yet. But we're prepping for that. We're getting ready. Okay? And the Rageblade change, we knew that, like, you guys have heard me answer this question many times over the years, that, like, players were not going to be thrilled. Because at the end of the day, Rageblade is fun. And if you change something that's fun, players' immediate reaction is skepticism. You're going to make it less fun. The problem with Rageblade was that it was only good with itself and only good with things that synergized with it, right? Like, if you put a Rageblade on a Senna versus a Rageblade on a 4 rapid-fire Zeri, the amount of attack speed being provided and the DPS increase being provided was non-linear and would get out of control. So, we have to rework it so that instead, if you put Guinsoo's on a Senna, you're going to get the same value as if you put Guinsoo's on a Zeri. Now, the article already published the number at, I believe, 6 seconds, or 6% attack speed per second. And I did my pass on Monday, and I already buffed it up to 7% because we still want, if you're 20 seconds into a fight, we still want it to feel like you're attacking very fast. And that's going to be true. With the changes we have, that's happening. That's a good thing. But, it's going to be less synergistic with itself. Now, one of the fun things, though, is that the way the number worked before was every auto attack increased the number on Guinsoo's by 1, right? And so you'd be like, whoa, 50 stacks, whoa, 60 stacks. While testing the new Rageblade, the number we show is actually how much attack speed you're getting. So it goes 7, 14, 21, 28, kind of like Archangels. And hilariously enough, that change has actually led to people actually being like, I thought the new Guinsoo's was better. Because you'll have rounds where it's like 140, 147, and you're like, whoa, that's so much. Which is really funny and shows you how much just putting a number on something can make it feel better. Shout out to every time we make a gold printing item, somebody going, put how much gold is on it on the tooltip. Because again, seeing a number go up, very, very satisfying. And I know a lot of people are looking at Rageblade right now and they're going, oh, you're taking the fun out of it and stuff like that. I'm not convinced that's true. Because if anything, one of the things we're doing is we are making Guinsoo's better on the people that couldn't use it normally, right? I keep using Senna as the example. Halfway point, a little slow walk today. I'm walking slow. I I always use Senna as the example because her base attack speed is 0.6. But before, if you put Guinsoos on a Senna, you weren't getting that much value. You know, maybe you would get to like 20 or 30 stacks, which isn't that much. And even that's like not very likely. But now, Guinsoo's on Senna will actually work. You'll get the full value. And because it's actually tuned so aggressively, it's kind of crazy. If you compare Archangel's to Deathcap, Archangel's ties Deathcap at 10 seconds and then passes it at 15 seconds. So you have to be 15 seconds into the fight before Archangel's is better than Deathcap. Guinsoo's and Red Buff is only 35% attack speed. New Guinsoo's ties it at 5 seconds and passes it at 6 seconds. Like, it's going to be a strong item. And again, the fact that you can now place it on anybody, you know, and obviously the combo that's going to be going around is like, well, it started, okay, see, I don't know why it did this. I'm going to have to learn why it did this recording, but it seemed to cut and start a new one for some reason. This stupid program, man. Anyway, hopefully I can just splice these together again like last time. So yeah, so that's it for Guinsoo's. Hilariously enough, I'm going to open up with you a little bit here that, God, see, now I'm tilted. Why does this game keep doing that? Anyway, I'm going to open up with you a little bit, like immediately, because again, other regions reach out to us, and we got a message from one of our regional partners, I won't say which region, that was like, hey, the community outcry for Rageblade. I don't know why this thing keeps stopping now. It's really annoying. I'll just be sitting here talking and all of a sudden a number will appear on the screen and go, we're ending the recording. Plenty of hard drive space, plenty of everything. I don't know, man. At least now I know how to merge the files together really quick, so hopefully this doesn't get cut off. But yeah, anyway, one of our regions definitely told us that Rageblade, the sentiment around it wasn't great. So, you know. But anyway, that's kind of the answer. We'll give it testing. You know, we'll see how it goes. I suppose worst case, if we ship the new Rageblade and everyone's like, it's so much less fun, it's so much less fun. You know, when 15 comes out, we could revert if we absolutely had to. But like, I'm pretty confident it'll be fine. It's just going to be one of those things that's like really, really painful at first. So, just my 2 cents. Okay, let's see if this thing won't stop recording. If it does, man, I'm going to have to figure something else out here. This is getting really annoying. Okay. The last question for the day was, if you stopped working on TFT, would you still have an online presence? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I don't know. Part of me wants to. I enjoy, so streaming started out as a hobby. It was meant to be, you know, something for me to do on my weekends, something for me to think about, a creative outlet, to share my old ideas, and me being old and share my wisdom, talk about games. And I enjoy it for that. And it also doubled up as like making me better at my job by being close to the community and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. But I'll also say, I definitely grew to a level that like I was never expecting, right? Like my closest comparisons at Riot are people like August, Freak, Blau before me, you know. Or, you know, if you go industry-wide, you've got your like your Ben Broads or your Jeff Kaplans on the western side of things. But like, I don't know, even comparing myself to Kaplan feels incorrect. He's way, you know, the dude's way smarter than I am. So I definitely grew more than I thought, which has come with, you know, some side things that I certainly wasn't expecting. You know, literally this morning, I saw a Twitter account that was like, Mortdog must die. And it's like, oops, shouldn't have opened Twitter. But man, that app has gotten so bad lately. Yeah. I don't want to get into that app, but every time I open that app and it's just like racist this and political that, and I just wanted to look at TFT stuff, man. So that hasn't been fun. So let's say today I made $10 million and could retire. Would I still have an online presence? I think about this a lot. I think the answer would actually be yes. For example, I've enjoyed doing these walks and just talking and things like this. Blue Velvet was like, we should do a podcast. And it's part of me was because podcasts are so overdone and everyone with a microphone thinks they can talk. But another part of me is yeah, sure. It kind of sounds fun to just sit and chill and do that, I've always thought one of the cool things to do, given my game design knowledge and things like that, there's two things I think I would do if I was in this situation. One would be I would just make fun games that take a year to make and do that on the side and go through that process. Though the negative to that would be midway through it, someone comes in, takes the idea, does it faster, makes it on mobile, and that'll feel like crap. That's just the industry nowadays. But I've had some fun, silly ideas that could be in that space. The other one I've talked about doing is, game reviewers. Game reviewers, unfortunately, right now, there's two camps. There's the journalist camp, which is the people who went to writing school, who don't actually know that much about games and are using gaming journalism as a stepping stone to something else, or they just don't quite know enough about the industry, or they're speaking from the outside and they make a lot of wrong conclusions, and it drives me nuts. And I see the wrong games get 9s and the right games get 7s, and I don't like it. But then there's the other side of game journalism, which is the YouTubers, which are these 20 to 30-year-old kids who also have no idea what they're talking about and will jump to the wildest conclusions that are just so out there. And it's these poor kids have no idea what they're talking about. They love games and they have good things to say about games, but then they'll be clearly the budgets were off. And it's what? No, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so having somebody who's been in the industry, I would love to do game reviews and just do it from my perspective, and because that way I could stream myself playing the games and then do the review. And the cool thing would be, because I'd be retired, I wouldn't need to be doing it for money. I wouldn't have to rush to deadlines. I wouldn't have to care what my click-through rates on the articles are or anything like that. I could just review and talk about games. But I also know I'm hypercritical, and I'm certainly not going to start doing that until I'm out of the industry, because the last thing I want to do is make a review site, say negative things about games, and then later find myself going, hey, I need a game design job. That's not a good strategy. So, yeah. So, I don't know. It'd be fun. Streaming would be fun. There are things I've wanted to do in the streaming ecosystem that I'm not allowed to because I'm a rioter. Things like a subathon, or for a while we had a Mortdog plushie, and we were gonna make those and have all the proceeds go to charity, but couldn't do that. I've never explored as much as I know about streaming now. I know so little about sponsorships and what those do. Because the other thing is, I did this to understand streaming as an ecosystem and YouTube as an ecosystem. Because man, watching companies no idea how any of this stuff works is really, really funny. I had to sit through a presentation where they were explaining that yeah, did you know kids like YouTube? And it's come on. I hope we didn't do a study to prove that. I just have a daughter right here, I could tell you. So yeah, I think now here, going back to your original question of would I have an online presence without TFT? I think it really depends on what I'm doing next, right? I'm going to exaggerate here, and let's say Riot says, we want you to go work on the MMO. They might not want me streaming, and at the end of the day, my job comes first, because that's what pays the bills and keeps my family supported. The streaming stuff is a hobby. And so if my job says, you got to stop the hobby, so be it, you know. So in a world where like I'm still working for Riot and on some R&D project, I might not be allowed to, you know. And so, but I think if the choice is up to me, creating these healthy barriers, going at it again, I do feel like I enjoy it, right? And like the interactions I have with like the golden squinks or sub chat, I enjoy those, and I think it's fun. And hopefully I've gotten enough messages from people who say like, hey, you've inspired me to try to like get my company to grow a little bit better in this area, or to pursue game design or stuff like that. I think that's worth it. So that's my thoughts. But yeah, there you go. All right, hopefully this recording all works. It's still recording now. And hopefully we can, you know, splice this all together and make for a good video. And one of these days I'll figure out whatever button is making it stop each time. But yeah, so that's it for today. Today on my schedule, more Set 15 deep dives, one-on-one with my boss. I used to love my one-on-ones with my boss. Now I don't know. I'm always nervous because it's just like, what new headache are we dealing with today? And I think that's one of the things that led to a little bit of my burnout, is just like, what new trouble? Because man, as the team has grown, the number of problems have grown sometimes, I swear. So, I don't know, man. And that's the thing, I've always said, like, part of my burnout wasn't just the streaming and the toxicity, but it was also, there's some Riot side stuff that, you know, has to be fixed. So, I don't know. But I also need to not play TFT today. Oh, that's the other thing. If I want anything on the PBE for the weekend for the patch, I would need to prep it today. But that being said, the items are all done. I did that Monday. And balance-wise, there doesn't look like that much needs to be hit. So it might just be good to wait till Monday on those. But anyway, I'm at the uphill part. Almost home. So, cool. I'm going to call it here. Hopefully you guys have a great day. It's almost the weekend. That's normally when I'd stream, but you know, we'll see. So, okay, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.